And Mr. Shivkumar has interesting ideas about the way art, literature, and cinema should interact with the city. Mr. Shivkumar.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's my presentation. I've come from India. Which one? This is forward. All right, thanks. Okay. Yeah. I come from India. I come from the city of Mumbai. You see that image on the left side? That's every day in Bombay. There are 20 million people who live in the city, which is the size of, I think, the population of the whole of the Netherlands. And they live on a tiny island. So you can imagine the densities that we are actually talking about. It's also the center of the Bombay film industry. So Bollywood, as it's commonly known, is based in Bombay. It's the stock exchange, the commercial capital of the country. So it is thriving, it has migration coming every day. And I live and work in Bombay. And I'd like to talk about what architecture and design is doing today in the city and the problems that we are facing. Because 60% of the city lives in a slum. A slum is an area which actually doesn't have any infrastructure, it's completely built informally. And 60% of Bombay lives informally, and design is not able to address the needs of that 60%. So let's just very quickly tell you what's happening in Bombay right now. This is the Prime Minister of India, and he says that Bombay needs to go through an entire makeover. The whole city needs to be changed immediately. And the model we need to use for changing it is we need to use Shanghai, if you read what's happening below. When we talk of a resurgent Asia, people think of the great changes that have come about in Shanghai. I share this aspiration to transform India, Mumbai, into Shanghai. And this has led to the creation of a huge number of reconstruction projects. Every square inch of the city is under reconstruction. There are new housing projects all over the place. There are new infrastructure projects. There are new metro lines. The edge of the city is constantly expanding to further and further away. And every single one of these new projects is catering to the private developer. And is designed so that a private developer makes a profit. And this is an image from a film, a Bollywood film, which clearly, in a very simple way, shows the formula that's being used, which is that who exists over there gets a minimum amount of housing, which is on the left, and the developer gets additional floor space that he can then sell on the market to make a profit. It's as simple as that. The formula is really as simple as that. And they've been using this formula to redevelop every square inch of the city. So this has led to some strange schizophrenias in the city. And all these schizophrenias are perfectly encapsulated in an area called mind space. Mind space, a space inside the head. It's not in the city, it's not in real life, it's inside the head. This used to be a garbage dump, one of the main garbage dumps of the city. And what they've done to the garbage dump is that they've taken turf and slapped it on top and made a kind of 3-story high mound, and they've called it a children's play area. And the entire area actually has only, these call centers. Do you know what a call center is? A place where people in India answer AT&T complaints for people in America. It's that kind of space. So there's absolutely no children around as far as the eye can see. And of course, there is exotic landscape imported from Thailand and from all kinds of exotic places that are all placed here. So what has happened is that, and this is all, of course, architecture and design. And architecture and design is very, very deeply involved with these displacements, moving Thailand to Bombay, making a garbage dump a garden. Or if you go within these huge glass-clad buildings, which have these incredible windows to look at the outside, you're not allowed to look outside. Because when you're within that, you're supposed to live in a time and space that you're talking to. If I'm talking to a customer in America, I need to believe it's 3:45 in the morning in New York. So I will not be able to look out of the window. So it's a completely strange displacement of time and space that's happening. As if that wasn't enough, there is a displacement of your very identity. This is a training session where young Indian kids are trained to speak in an American accent, are told that, which one do you think has more variety, India or America? And the answer is America. So your very identity is being erased. Your history, which is this John F. Kennedy below, you're being taught American history so that you can converse with the Americans. So your identity, time, space are all being displaced. And all of it is being enabled by architects and designers. Besides which, there is this myth of a future. We are progressing towards some god-forsaken futuristic place, and lights and dazzling cameras and all these reflective surfaces, in a sense, symbolize that future. So you have a mythification of the future, and at the base of it, you have the mythification of the past. You see that cute little, oh sorry, I went back. You see that cute little cardboard hut there? That is supposed to be our tribal roots. So there's a bastardization, as it were, of a future and a bastardization of the past. And that's what actually is happening today in the city of Bombay. And all of this is happening with for these yuppies who are looking at you saying, why go outside when there's a multiplex inside? Which means that you can effectively live an entire life completely removed from any sense of the city, completely separated. And this is actually an ad for a developer project. So it's this kind of landscape that actually exists for around 30%. This is the aspiration for 30% of Bombay. But directly outside these landscapes of exclusion are, there's a guy who's sleeping on the street in the middle of a pavement, and it's not as if he doesn't have a house. He has a slum house, which is right below this. It's a flyover actually, and every day at night he comes and takes his colorful little blanket and places it on top of the divider and sleeps there. So there's a strange kind of home that's being created. Or you have these guys who are this is Mindspace, by the way, right in the back. And just outside it are the guys who built the slum, built Mindspace, and they actually work there right now. And there's no water supply, they live in kind of crap, and architects are not able to understand this or even deal with it. But at the same time, this entire world, which lies outside this quote-unquote mind space, has an energy and a drive, a certain kind of a way in which they tactically maneuver the city. Like, for example, this is on a road divider again. Barber shop is set up while a road is under construction. When the road is completed, the barber shop moves somewhere else. So they're perpetually kind of negotiating these new changes that are happening in the city. Or you have this guy who's selling chandeliers outside a place that sells home furnishing. So there's I guess an entrepreneurial spirit, I guess you can call it that, that exists. Or this, which is a school that runs on the pavement. It's a school with uniforms, with blackboards, with teachers. They give official examinations, but it runs on the pavement of the city. So you're walking up and down, I heard cars speeding by, and you have kids sitting there and learning. So the everyday life of the city has evolved its own methods and its own mechanisms to be able to deal with the madness of the city of Bombay. To be able to make institutions, to be able to make homes, to be able to make cricket playing areas, which are not official. They lie outside the formal. They lie outside, in that sense, they lie in the informal. And the informal has its own design language, if you want to call it. A design language that consists of collecting, scavenging, stealing, reassembling parts to create its own method of communication. This is a tire shop. Anywhere in India you go across the city, across the country, a tire shop will be symbolized by this. But this is unfortunately something that designers and architects are not able to comprehend, because our way of training, the way that we understand what design is supposed to do, cannot be comprehended by this. So the question is, how do we as architects understand what the problem is? Who is the client that we are working for? What is the role that we play as designers? And of course, how do we understand these things? These are three of the main actors who are involved in the process of design. And because as a practitioner, because I practice as well as in the city of Bombay, I have to decide as to how do I work? How do I negotiate this landscape? These are the three main. There's the state, who has now had the kind of mandate of the greater common good, but has given it up, washed its hands off and said, we can't do it anymore, it's the market that needs to do it. The market is interested in profit and doesn't necessarily care about the greater common good. It's busy making money. And meanwhile, there's the academic space, which says that it has two roles to play. It can either become a service provider, is that it just makes people who can then work in the current market, or it says it needs to be in an insular space of the ivory tower so that it can imagine new ways of dealing with the world, I guess. I teach at an architecture college, and this is something that we struggled with for a while. And then we came up with this idea of a design cell. The design cell is it's a body within the school that bridges these boundaries. It lies within the academic, but it works with non-governmental and governmental organizations in real-time projects in the city. Because it's academic, it can deal with research, so it does not completely cater to the market. And because it is working in the practice, it is also doesn't run the danger of being completely in an ivory tower. So it kind of manages that. And we've been working in many projects in the city within the slum community, and I'll be talking about one of them right now. One iconic one, which is called the Dharavi project. I don't know whether you know about Dharavi. Dharavi was very well known and is still very, very well known as one of the most famous slums in Bombay, actually in India. It has a population of, is that 37600? It's extremely dense. It's in the heart of the city, and it is thriving with lots and lots and lots of activities. Slumdog Millionaire became iconic because of this kind of space. But if you go to Dharavi today, this is the whole slum. And if you look at all these boundaries, these various colors that are there, Dharavi is not one entity. It consists of very distinct and different communities. Each of those communities is involved in a different work, is involved in different kinds of activities, come from different cultures, languages. So it's actually a web of complex networks and communities. And it's an industry. It's an industry. There are workshops, there are potters. These guys make leather that is then sold as Gucci. And you have an incredible recycling industry. An incredible recycling industry that really kind of takes all the junk out from the city and transforms it into something that's usable. Unfortunately, none of this is recognized in the state plan for Dharavi. This is the plan that was famously called the Mukesh Mehta plan. What they've done now is all that complexity has completely been erased. And what they've done, they've divided the whole area into, if you see those color bands, those are what they call 5 sectors. The idea is that we'll ask international developers to come, redevelop these areas, and we'll give them a lot of bonus area that they can sell on the open market. Unfortunately, the community, unfortunately for them that is, the local communities in Dharavi got wind of this plan and decided that they wanted redevelopment, but they didn't want it on those terms. They thought that their own livelihood, their own communities were being threatened by this plan. So they approached the school and asked us to come up with an alternative plan. So we began a process of dialoguing with them to start understanding what that plan could be. And one of the things we did is that we first looked at what the plan entailed. And these were the kind of images being made. This was made by a developer. This is Norman Foster's proposal, which effectively cleansed the whole area and made it a dazzling kind of delight of lights and of some strange Indianness, if you want to call it that. Some saris and some sparkles in the sky. And below this, actually, if you just scratch below the surface of this, this is the real diagram. This is another developer. All this really is, all the proposals that came were only about calculating profit, of maximizing a possible profit for a developer. So what happened is that these were the kinds of plans being made. Banal, completely without character. None of the kinds of livelihoods of the existing communities were being taken into consideration. And you got these doubly loaded corridors with absolutely no light and ventilation in the middle. This is the kind of architecture that would have happened. Relentless, with absolutely no light and ventilation coming into the heart of the building. This is the insides of those buildings, darkened. They are disease infested completely. And meanwhile, what is the academic world doing? This is a proposal by AA London, which loves Dharavi a lot. This is a proposal where they went and they did an iconic skyscraper. So you kind of leave the slum as it is, and you kind of step aside and you decide to use it as a place for a science fictionization, as it were, of what can be seen as an alien planet in these slum dwellers, Okay. Or this one, which is even more entertaining, which is we are not negating them. Let the people in the slums live their normal lives. What we're trying to do is make more housing available through our mega type. And this mega type is actually a building that hovers all over the slum. That doesn't allow absolutely any light or ventilation to come within at all. Or my personal favorite is this one, which submerged the slum to save the country. So in this case, the entire slum is supposed to be submerged underwater. and in those animal-like things is where the slum dwellers are supposed to live. So there is a certain kinds of almost Martian landscape that's imagined, because, and actually it's not a problem. The problem emerges because we don't understand how to deal with these areas. It happens because the academic world doesn't have a frame of reference through which we are able to engage with these spaces at all. So this is something that we decided that we wanted to kind of work through. And we really had to find a way for us to read the city. And we kind of started with conversations. We put a group of students together, a group of 40 students, and we have a group in the design cell. And then they were involved with actually going on site, walking in the slum areas, talking to people, identifying communities, finding out what kind of work they are involved in, finding out the kinds of spaces in which they work. This is farsan. Farsan is a kind of foodstuff. There's a lot of activity in Dharavi. So to start mapping in exactly what ways this work was happening, how many people were involved, and what are the requirements that they had, and what are the kinds of networks they have with the rest of the city, because none of those were being acknowledged by the Mukesh Mehta plan. We looked at printing industries. It's an incredibly thriving space. Broom making, and these are all home-based industries. So the woman of the house, the child of the house, they have a network that work together. Sometimes entire streets are involved in making of jeans. Somebody stitches it, then in the next house puts the buttons, the next house packages it, and at the other end, a kind of truck comes and takes it away. So all of those networks are going to be broken with the new redevelopment. But that we didn't want to only look at that scale and romanticize those activities. We also had to evolve a realistic plan for the redevelopment of Dharavi, because that's what the slum dwellers wanted. They didn't want to continue living in an area that had absolutely no infrastructure. They wanted infrastructure as well. So we then looked at what the Mukesh Mehta plan had, and we saw the roads. You see in the red are the roads that are cutting through the existing communities. And what we did is that we took one area as a pilot area, and we started then looking at perhaps realigning the roads, acknowledging the existing boundaries, moving the roads around. Rather than looking from a top-down approach, which would just slam a straight road in, we started weaving the roads in and out, acknowledging the fact that certain communities have certain areas that they kind of work in. We mapped all the public spaces and the institutions that existed in those areas. And those became the way in which we started looking at dividing the whole of Dharavi into distinct communities that could then evolve independent of each other. So while the master plan wasn't compromised because some of the overall systems were taken care of at the larger scale, we also tried to evolve a bottom-up approach that would acknowledge the differences that exist within the different parts of Dharavi. And this was then going to kind of come together to form the larger master plan, as it were, of Dharavi. And what happened is that we took certain different communities. This is an area of potters called Kumbharwada. And we studied them in the way that they kind of make their pots. Their houses are these, if you look at it, it's a very clear organization. What you see in blue on the edge are shops. The yellows are the houses themselves. And what you see in brown behind in the backyards are the kilns where the burning happens of the pots. We started studying how these activities took place. We looked at how the morphology or the larger pattern of the area was evolving because of this work. And we then started evolving a housing project that acknowledged these different needs of this particular community. We created plan sections. We made a kind of we worked out the financial model. We worked absolutely everything out. Sorry, it's not moving again. And we then came up with these designs. Okay. And we came up with not just one, we came up with many. We took many different areas within Dharavi, each within a different kinds of community system. And we evolved different typologies, different urban structures for each of them and showed how they could all plug in together to form the larger fabric of Dharavi. After that, we went to the state. And we went to the state carrying with us we actually did a big rhetorical exercise. We spoke to media, we spoke to newspapers, we got people to make films upon the subject, and they all supported us. And then we showed the state, which was at that point going ahead with that master plan, that there is a possible alternative that is financially viable, that has community satisfaction, and that a developer can still make profit on. within the existing framework. At that point, the state, because of the media blitz actually, had to shut up and say, okay, we'll listen to you for a while. And luckily at that point what happened is that the market collapsed, which was a very good thing for us. Okay? Because what happened is that all the developers that were vying for that work suddenly disappeared. They were nowhere there. So now we could realistically come up with another alternative model. The state made us part of what they call the expert committee for the redevelopment of Dharavi. We quickly realized that this expert committee was just lip service. We were just being heard so that we could be shut up later. So then we resigned from there. And then we came up with a book, actually. We came up with a book that is sold in bookshops. And that's why I think cross-disciplinary or multidisciplinary practice is very interesting and exciting, because I think that was the architecture project. The making of the book was the architecture project. It wasn't necessarily the building that was going to happen at the end. So we came up with the book that is now sold in bookshops. And currently, right now, we are working with 2 specific communities within Dharavi, and we are going to build. We are involved in the process of talking to them. We are going to try and demonstrate in built form the possibility of an alternative model for the redevelopment of different communities in Dharavi. That's what we are working on as of this moment. But to summarize, since I have exactly 0 right now, fundamentally, the question is what design can do for the informal. First of all, we need to understand the fact that current design practices, current design education, current kind of architectural education is unable to figure out how the informal works. Absolutely incapable of it. It either romanticizes it completely, or on the other hand, it dismisses it off and gets this technocratic idea of its erasure. That's the 2 models that we have. We are not able to kind of figure out the existing patterns that exist. So we have to start experimenting and innovating with new ways of reading to understand not only what exists, but also the aspirations of the slum dwellers. We have to look at new ways of representation that are able to communicate ideas in an easier way to communities. And we have to start looking at intervention not only as sitting in an office, and as somebody has already pointed out earlier, as in a quote-unquote activist mode, where we are more involved with actually getting policies changed, getting things built, and etc. That's it. I think that's it. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Mr. Shivkumar,
Yes.
thank you for critiquing designers severely and heavily. And then, because you not only showed designers who make project development ideas without any substance, but you had as well one of the AAA, the master students, and you say they don't know how to relate to informal. About the last one, how could they relate to informal? Step up here.
Sorry. I think what happens in design education, at least I know about Indian design education, is that we are taught in a very kind of professionalized mode. You know, you have to assume a professional position, which means that you have to have a client and you have to have this, and you need a kind of separation that exists. When we are trying to when we have to kind of really discover what our role is supposed to be, that professionalization needs to be not necessarily completely dismantled, but needs to be problematized. We need to be able to know what the difficulty is about that professional position.
Do we need to get more in as designers and not be outside?
I think I agree with you completely, but it would also be naive to imagine that we can become a slum dweller. I think we have to also have our own position as far as architects are concerned, as far as designers are concerned. To simply say that, oh, the slum dwellers want this, therefore we should give it to them, would be, I think, naive. Because communities are complicated things. Communities are not necessarily wanting the greater common good in any way. Communities are fractured and difficult and have their own prejudices. Those we need to be able to understand, but not necessarily accept.
Yeah. How do you think that such as the AA proposals, people laugh here about proposals from a master's degree from a serious architecture institute in England. I love them that they laugh about it, really. I think, wow, now we're getting somewhere. How can it be that it's so detached from what is going on?
I think I don't want to, I must say this, I don't want to completely dismiss the AA or anybody who's working in architectural speculation.
neither.
Because, I think experiment and innovation is important. I think it's important to kind of stretch the boundaries of what is called the knowledge of architecture. And I don't think that's going to happen by, us kind of romanticizing things. I loved Big City, and I love those kinds of proposals because they really kind of help you think something new, and new knowledges, I guess, emerge. But and this kind of science fictionization, it's an inevitable part of a certain Orientalist tradition, which kind of sees the South as a place for experimenters, as an exotic other. The difficulty is when we as Indian designers start really appreciating that. And we believe that that is the mode through which we need to work in our cities.
And that's what you did with modernism in 20, 30 years ago, a sort of important design thinking, which was completely overtaken by local architects.
Yeah, and completely, exactly. And what has happened now is that we have a lot of people in India who are, parametricizing, if that's the word, the whole of the city, and coming up with these blobs and these incredible forms, beautifully rendered, I'm sure. But their relevance as far as kind of getting something implemented as far as the greater common, as far as the city is concerned, is getting more and more complicated.
Okay, I will have to end. I read a tweet from Class XD. Shivkumar accuses designers and architects of not understanding or acknowledging reality. Very effective and anti-romantic. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.